Think back to every World Cup you've watched. Think about the ones that went wrong for a team. The heavy defeat in the first game, the players arguing with the bench, the sense that something is broken before the tournament has even found its rhythm. You've seen it before. We all have. But what happened at the 2026 World Cup this past weekend was something most of us have never seen. A coach was sacked during the group stage after just one match. Not at halftime, not during some crisis that built over weeks. After one game, one afternoon, 90 minutes of football that ended a man's tenure at a World Cup before it had barely started. In the long history of this tournament, stretching back decades across dozens of host nations and hundreds of squads, this is believed to be the first time a national team coach has been dismissed during the group stage after a single match. That's not just a statistic, it's a statement about what modern international football has become and about the very particular pressure that Tunisia carried into this tournament. The match was a 5-1 defeat to Sweden, and for a team that had worked for years to qualify for this stage, it wasn't just a loss, it was a humiliation that apparently left the federation with no choice. Let's take a step back and understand how we got here, because the story of what happened in that stadium in Monterrey didn't begin on Sunday. It began months ago, with a chain of decisions and disappointments that had already left Tunisian football fragile before a ball was kicked in anger at the 2026 World Cup. Tunisia came into this tournament having sacked their previous manager just 5 months ago. That coach, also dismissed by mutual consent, lost his job following an early exit from the Africa Cup of Nations, knocked out in the round of 16 by Mali, in a match that should never have been so close. A team that many had tipped as potential contenders went out to 10 men in extra time. The cracks were already visible. Into that environment stepped Sabri Lamouchi, a French-born Tunisian heritage coach with a CV that included stints at club level in England and France and international experience at a previous World Cup with Ivory Coast. He was appointed in January of this year and given a contract meant to cover 2.5 years. The mandate was clear: stabilize the squad, build something for the long term, and guide the Eagles of Carthage through the group stage of the 2026 World Cup. He managed one win in 5 matches before the tournament, and then came Sunday. The Sweden game, from what has been reported, was damaging in multiple ways. It wasn't just the scoreline, 5 goals conceded, 1 scored, a 4-goal margin on the first day. It was the manner of it. An early goal conceded within minutes, individual errors that went beyond tactical problems, and then, tellingly, a visible confrontation between a substituted player and the bench, the kind of image that a football federation never wants broadcast to the world on the opening weekend of a World Cup. It told a story of a dressing room that wasn't fully behind the manager, a team that didn't know what it was doing or why, and a structure that had crumbled under the very first serious test. Lamouchi had also made selection choices ahead of the tournament that drew criticism within Tunisia, choosing not to include experienced campaigners who between them had accumulated well over 200 international appearances. The logic of starting fresh, of building something new, is understandable in theory, but at a World Cup, experience isn't just nice to have, it's often the thing that holds a team together when the pressure becomes real. What do you think? When a squad heads into the biggest tournament in football, is that the right moment to gamble on youth and new ideas? Or do you keep your most experienced voices in the room, even if it means accepting limitations elsewhere? I'd genuinely be curious to hear what you think, because the tension between rebuilding and competing is one of the oldest problems in international football. Tunisia, in the months leading up to this World Cup, seemed to be trying to do both simultaneously, and on Sunday in Monterrey, the weight of that contradiction came crashing down all at once. The federation's response was swift. Within days of the defeat, the Tunisian Football Federation had terminated Lamouchi's contract and turned to a name that in African football carries a very specific kind of weight: Hervé Renard. If you've followed international football across the last 15 years, and if you're watching this, you probably have, you'll know exactly what that name means. Renard is one of the most distinctive figures in modern football management. A Frenchman, calm in demeanor, almost always photographed in that white shirt, with a track record that genuinely defies easy categorization. He won the Africa Cup of Nations with Zambia in 2012. That alone would be enough to secure a legacy. Zambia were rank outsiders, and the story of that victory carried extraordinary emotional weight. Played out in Gabon, near the site where a plane carrying the Zambian national team had crashed in 1993, killing everyone on board. Renard had spoken to his players about what it would mean to win there, and they did win. 8-7 on penalties, in a final that will live long in the memory of anyone who saw it.
3 years later, he won it again, this time with Ivory Coast, a squad full of established names and decades of near misses. To win the Africa Cup of Nations with 2 different countries is something no other coach in the tournament's history has managed. That achievement alone separates Renard from almost everyone else in his profession. Since then, he's managed at a World Cup with Morocco, guided Saudi Arabia to one of the great upsets of the modern era when they defeated Argentina in Qatar in 2022, coached the French women's national team, and most recently returned to Saudi Arabia before being let go just a couple of months ago. He's been available, and when Tunisia came calling, he said yes. He now takes charge of a team that has played 1 game, lost by 4 goals, and must face Japan in their second group match before squaring up against the Netherlands. In any realistic reading of the situation, Tunisia's path to the knockout stage is extremely narrow, but Renard has walked into impossible situations before. What's interesting here is not just whether Tunisia can turn this around, it's what the act of bringing in Renard tells us about how African football associations operate under pressure. This is now the 6th African national team that has appointed him. There is clearly a belief across the continent that Renard carries something, a quality of organization, of motivation, of calm under fire that can change a team's atmosphere quickly. Tunisia have just 5 days before their second game, 5 days to install an idea, a shape, a belief. It's barely enough time to run training sessions properly, let alone remake a squad's psychological state. And yet, the Saudis upset Argentina with Renard in charge after a halftime team talk that has become the stuff of football folklore. There are certain managers who can make a group of players believe something has changed simply by walking through the door. Whether Renard is still that manager, whether Tunisia have the players to execute what he asks, those are the questions that June 20th will begin to answer. There's a broader conversation happening around this story, though, one that goes beyond Tunisia specifically. This 2026 World Cup is already demonstrating, in the very first days, just how unforgiving modern international football has become. The tournament has expanded to 48 teams. More nations are involved than ever before. There are groups from which only 1 team progresses to the knockout rounds depending on the format. And in that environment, the margin for error is not just small. For some teams, it's essentially 0. A 5-1 defeat in the opening game against a Sweden side that qualified without particular fanfare leaves a team needing to win both remaining games and hope that other results go their way. The mathematics become almost impossible, and for a federation that has already seen multiple managers come and go in recent years, the calculation was apparently simple. Something had to change, and it had to change now.
Whether that calculation was right, whether dismissing a manager in the middle of a World Cup group stage can actually produce the results needed, is a question that football history offers complicated answers to. There are precedents of mid-tournament changes having no effect at all. There are also moments where a change in leadership genuinely shifted something in a squad. What's undeniable is that the pressure on African teams at this World Cup is real and specific. The continent has historically been underrepresented in the later stages of the tournament, despite producing players who perform at the highest level for the biggest clubs in Europe. There is always a sense, going into a World Cup, that a group stage exit for a major African nation is accompanied by questions about preparation, about federation decisions, about whether these squads are ever given the conditions they need to perform at their best. Tunisia now find themselves at the center of that conversation in a more dramatic way than anyone anticipated. There's also something worth saying about Sabri Lamouchi himself. Whatever the reasons for the defeat, and however justified the federation's decision might have been in their own assessment, a man's coaching career has taken a significant blow in front of a global audience. He came into the job 5 months ago. He faced a team in transition, with disputes about selection and clear unresolved issues in the dressing room. The 5-1 result was his, but the conditions that produced it were not built in a day. Football, particularly at international level, has a way of making everything look simple in hindsight. He'll coach again. His career, with experience across several countries and competitions, is not defined by one afternoon in Monterrey. But it's worth pausing on the human reality of what happened beneath all the headlines. So where does this leave Tunisia? They face Japan next, a Japan side that is no longer the surprise package of World Cups past. They've demonstrated in recent tournaments that they can compete at a serious level. Then the Netherlands. Whatever hope remains for Tunisia's campaign will likely be decided in those 5 days between now and their second game. Renard arrives with a clear mandate and almost no time. The players will know who he is. They'll know what he's won. Whether that knowledge translates into something on the pitch, into the kind of renewed belief that can close a 4-goal deficit in terms of goal difference and generate the results Tunisia need, is genuinely uncertain. But this is the World Cup. Genuinely uncertain is part of the deal. It's why we watch. For me, the question I keep turning over is this. In a tournament that has expanded to give more nations a place at the table, are we also creating conditions where the pressure becomes so extreme that normal processes collapse within days? Is this a sign of something changing in how football federations operate at major tournaments, a new willingness to make drastic decisions at any moment? Or is this simply a story unique to Tunisia, shaped by their specific recent history of managerial changes, and a result that left them no choice? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on that. Whether you've watched Tunisia over the years, whether you've followed Renard's career, or whether you simply find the broader story fascinating, leave it in the comments. This is exactly the kind of moment that football fans remember and debate for years afterward. If this kind of conversation is what you're looking for, detailed, unhurried, rooted in the actual stories the game produces, then a like genuinely helps this channel reach people who'd appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to follow the 2026 World Cup in this way across the weeks ahead, and tell me what you think below. Football is full of moments that look, in retrospect, like turning points. The question is always which ones actually were. Tunisia's first game at the 2026 World Cup may be remembered as a collapse, or it may be remembered as the moment Hervé Renard walked back into the story. Either way, we'll know soon enough.